Yes, yes. Good morning. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. This is where we have casual, but culturally relevant and compelling conversations on a variety of topics, decidedly from a global perspective. That's what we do here. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. We're heard on Facebook, several different pages there. YouTube, find that, like and subscribe. We're trying to improve our algorithms, if you will, at YouTube. It's also the audio version is also uh, repurposed and put out there as a podcast, and wherever you get your favorite podcast and whatnot, that's where you can find us. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Today, I was just really contemplating culture. We're hearing the news of the passing of Frankie Beverly. I mean, it's a phenomenon because his music is so very beloved. He is definitely entrenched in the DNA of Black culture. Never won a Grammy or any of those major music awards. In fact, his songs never exceeded number 69 on the Billboard charts. Yet his music is intrinsically embedded, implanted, grafted in to our DNA here in the culture. We lost James Earl Jones earlier this week, and I was just kind of thinking about the culture because when I looked at mainstream media, I just feel like, his accomplishments and who he was, how, you know, deeply entrenched into the DNA of American culture this man was. The mainstream media really didn't do it much justice. And then lastly, we had the debate this week, and what's interesting culturally is we move through the world with a pan-African consciousness. Here we invite a lot of different people on the air to talk about various aspects of pan-African history, various aspects of pan-African thought and culture. And I wonder, as we get caught up in the fever that is Vice President Kamala Harris beginning to move for the president of the United States, as people begun to forget their Pan African consciousness? How do we maintain our culture consciousness in such a time as this? I know it's a complex question, but it's one of those things that I like to talk about because just kind of think out loud. It's like, man, are we losing our connectivity to our origins in Africa? What's our Pan-African consciousness in this day and time? I hope that makes sense. Well, I brought some friends along to help me make sense. Ladies and gentlemen, scholar, author, entrepreneur, Pan-African all-star, Tony Browder is here. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Greg, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Doing all right. I know you're real busy, man, and I'm so grateful you took the time out to come and sip some coffee with me. But look, tell the people a little bit about yourself and the exciting event that you have coming up. I'm trying to get up to Washington, D.C. to experience it.
Well, I'm a person who has rediscovered their Pan-African consciousness as a result of graduating from an HBCU, Howard University, in 1974, and feeling that something was missing, feeling as though I was not adequately prepared to move through the world, through the society that I was born in. And I found the answer on February the 21st, 1977.
Wow.
And I attended a lecture by Ivan Van Sertima, who had just published They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in America. And during the course of that presentation, he mentioned that it was Africans from the Nile Valley who built ships, navigated the Nile River, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean, and made numerous voyages to the Americas, specifically to the country we now call Mexico. He showed the documentation, showed numerous images of heads that were carved by these Africans that were attached to temples and pyramids and tombs. And then he said that some of these Africans were from Egypt and the Egyptians were black. That was the first time in my life anyone had ever told me that the ancient Egyptians were black. And it blew my mind. I just happened to have visited the King Tut exhibition, which was at the National Gallery of Art the prior month. And I went to see that exhibition through the eyes of an artist. I'm formally trained as an artist, a graphic designer. I went back to see that exhibit after having been armed with the knowledge gained from listening to Van Sertima. And this time I saw an entirely different exhibition. I could see myself in the images of this boy king. I could see myself and identify with other aspects of these items, cultural items that were on display. And that shifted me and made me aware of what I now refer to as forbidden knowledge. Information, historical and cultural information that had been intentionally withhidden from people of African ancestry. That began my journey. I discovered Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Dr. Jackson, Chancellor Williams. I made my first trip to Egypt in 1980 with Dr. Ben. I made my 68th trip to Egypt 2 months ago in July. I've been doing study tours to Egypt for the past 35 years. I have been funding archaeological excavations in Egypt for the past 15 years. And next weekend here in Washington, D.C., where I currently reside, we will celebrate the 16th anniversary of the ASA Restoration Project, which is the vehicle in which we have been funding our archaeological excavations and restoration of tombs of 25th dynasty Kushite nobles. So we've got a 2-day event. We'll have my dear colleague and friend Charles Finch on Friday, September the 20th. And then on Saturday, September 21st, we'll have an event where there's a facility in Washington, D.C. that currently is exhibiting 1,000 replicas of artifacts found in King Tut's tomb. So we have rented the facility for the evening. We will have a gala reception. We'll have remarks. And then Dr. Finch and I would do a curated tour of this exhibition and then have a book signing. So, yeah, my friends said that I'm the second busiest man in Washington, D.C. And I'm doing what I love to do, which is why I'm here talking to you this morning.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate it. Tony, let me ask you a question. Okay, so here in Washington, D.C., and certainly this is a phenomenon all around the country right now. We just came out of watching the debate. Everybody is riding the Kamala Harris wave. Well, not everybody, but folks are really, they're into it, and so sometimes I get the sense of, as I look across the news, that maybe, and it could be just me, but maybe we as a people are beginning to lose or minimize our consciousness to our Pan-African origins. We're more tend to embrace, now that Kamala's in, our Americanness, if there's such a thing, and maybe our consciousness towards Africa has waned, or we're not paying as much attention to our African origins as we used to even a few months ago. Would you agree with that, or what do you think is happening? How are we maintaining our consciousness?
Well, brother, so let me give you an example that speaks exactly to that point. At the top of the show, you welcome the ladies and gentlemen who are listening to your program. So, gentleman is an old English word which describes a white man who beats his wife gently with an open hand as opposed to a closed fist. So, because of the fact that we were born in America and we speak the language of our former enslavers and colonizers, we have internalized their value system, their cultural orientation. And as a consequence, we don't know our own language. We don't appreciate our own God concepts. And we have been socialized to believe the closer we come to speaking like, thinking like, acting like our former oppressors, the more acceptable we are and the more human we are. Well, the benefit of cultivating what was known in the 20th century, early 20th century, as a Pan-African consciousness, and is now referred to as an African-centered consciousness, speaks to the essence of our being. No people can be truly free as long as they see themselves and their realities through the lens of their oppressors. So the work that I have been motivated to do for the last 47 years has been as a result of my awakening and discovering that I was an African living in America. And I embraced that. I embraced that because America is the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history. And there is some value in that. But America is also responsible for funding wars that have devastated this planet, creating technology that has destroyed the environment. And so it's a mixed bag. You mentioned Frankie Beverly, whose loss we're mourning. Frankie Beverly sang about the joy and pain, the sunshine and the rain. That song reflects our experience. So we have to know who we are, understand who we are as people of African ancestry, so that we can find joy in the pain, right? So we can look forward to the sunshine beyond the rain, because everything is cyclical. Nothing lasts forever, right? And nothing that goes is lost. So the difficulties and the challenges that we have been confronted with here in America are temporary. If you have a global African concept and understand at the core of your soul information that has intentionally been withheld from people of African descent, and information that has also been withheld from most people on the planet. And very simply, I'll lay this out, present this information to you and your audience, and this information which will probably be new to your audience. And I will share with everyone that I only talk about things that I know. I don't talk about things that I think. I don't talk about things that I believe, because a belief is something you accept without proof. I talk about things that I know. And I know these things based on scientific and historical facts that are valid and have been proven to be valid, not something that I want to embrace as my reality. So there's an exhibition here in DC at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in the Coke Hall of Human Origins. This exhibition is about 20 years old. And to give you some important takeaways from this exhibition, it says, based on scientific fact, that 200,000 years ago, Africans were the only people on the planet, the only human beings on the planet. Now, since this exhibition opened, new data has come out, which has moved that starting point for humanity back at least 100,000 years. So we can say, based on the available scientific evidence, that African Americans, as Africans, as Homo sapiens sapiens, people with a consciousness and the consciousness to know that they have consciousness, have lived on this planet at least 300,000 years. It also said in the exhibition that around 60,000 years ago, a group of these Africans began walking out of Northeast Africa into Asia and populated Asia. It goes on to say that 40,000 years ago, another group of these Africans walked out of Africa into Western Asia, the landmass that we now refer to as Europe, and populated Europe. So if we put a pin in those three statements, one, Africans were the first human beings on the planet and have been living here at least 300,000 years. Two, Africans were the first human beings in Asia. Three, Africans were the first human beings in Europe. That is information that everybody needs to know. And geneticists have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that every person who has lived or will ever live has within their mitochondrial DNA, that part of their cell structure passed on to them by their mother. Everybody has the genetic material from the original African women who walked on this planet and gave birth to humanity. Now, that's a scientific fact, whether people are willing to embrace it or not. So everybody on this planet is of African descent. Everybody on this planet can benefit from returning to the mother and cultivating an African-centered consciousness. If that were to happen on a grand scale, then I would think we would have greater appreciation for people of African descent, phenotypically African descent, who are the mothers and fathers of humanity. And we would also have a greater appreciation for the cultures that African people created in the motherland before they had contact with Europeans and or Asians. So that's an education that I've been advocating for well over 30 years. And it's something that I will talk about and teach until I am no longer breathing.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. It's so funny. I was listening to you there, and it's passed down through our mother's side. I was just having a conversation with my grandson about our lineage going all the way back to Africa, and wishing that I could find out who that person was that came out of the Cameroon area to get over here. And I was sharing with him, we were talking about his mom, my daughter, and how her lineage, like most African families, when they talk about their lineage, they speak primarily about the mother's side. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of, like, I know in the Zulus, this is the thing. They trace their people back, their relations back to the mother's side. And even in the Bible, the first one that when they talk about the lineage of Jesus, they talk about his mom's side and everything. This is like a Africanism, and that for you to break that down into the DNA, the mitochondria from the mother's side, and all the way back to somebody, whatever the African woman is the origin, that's the thing. That's pretty interesting. Just now, you just enlightened me.
So Greg, let me drop something else of interest to you. So if you want to know who that African person was that gave birth to you, your daughter, your grandson, I would highly recommend that you contact African Ancestry. African Ancestry was the very first genetic testing company developed here in the United States. They're about 13 years old, founded by Gina Page and Rick Kittles. And they have the database, the DNA database, to be able to take a swab of your genetic material and tell you where in Africa your ancestors came from. So you mentioned Cameroon. I don't know if you just mentioned that casually, but I did my DNA with African Ancestry, my maternal DNA with African Ancestry in the early 20s, and my maternal DNA came back to the Bamalake and Takar people in Cameroon. I did my paternal DNA as well, and found out that my father's DNA has come back for a 98% match for the Yoruba in Nigeria. So while I may not know the names of the ancestors whose DNA comprise my being, I do know where they came from, and that's a very important beginning for people of African ancestry living in the Americas.
Yes, I did not do African Ancestry DNA. I'm going to do that one. I did the ancestry.com one, but I came back 80% Cameroon.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
well, that's, and let me put it to you this way to give you a sense of the genetic database. African Ancestry has a database of African continental Africans of over 35,000 samples.
Mm-hmm.
Ancestry.com and 23andMe have less than 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
So African Ancestry has the capacity to more specifically target what group in Cameroon. You're from Cameroon, it's a vast country, right?
Yes.
So they can give you specific detailed information. And if I might add, Gina Page is a good friend of mine. What they are doing now with the people that they have identified with certain African countries, they are partnering with those countries to develop citizenship for those people of the descent of that country. So they have a relationship with the president of Cameroon, and they've taken groups over where the president of Cameroon has given citizenship to Cameroonians or African Americans of Cameroonian descent who live in this country. So bridges are being built, and this these Pan-African connections are being reestablished now, which for me are very promising in that despite who may win this presidential election, we have some options. And one of the options that I'm encouraging every African American to consider is to keep a valid passport and to keep enough money in your bank account to buy a ticket to some African nation should the need arise.
Amen. I'm with that 200%. We promote that all the time. Yes, sir. Well, let me tell you a quick story. Yes, you're absolutely right. And the reason that I know I need to go to AfricanAncestry.com is because when I learned of my Cameroonian DNA, I was very, very happy. I have a lot of friends from Cameroon, continental Africans that live here in this area. So one of my buddies, Brother Charles, shout out to Charles and Pamela. How are y'all? Okay, so I find out I'm Cameroon. I was so happy. And I see Brother Charles at an event. I said, Brother Charles, I'm from Cameroon. He goes, oh, my brother. He hugs me up. He goes, what are you, Belinda? And then I was like,
African Ancestry would tell you who you are, my brother.
yes.
And I'm not doing a commercial for them because I'm receiving compensation. I'm promoting them because I appreciate the value of what they do. And let me share this with you quickly, and then we can pivot on to the rest of the interview. I grew up all of my adult life not knowing who my biological father was. And when I did my paternal DNA through African Ancestry, I found out that my father's DNA was a 98% match for Yoruba in Nigeria. And I can't tell you how fulfilling that was to know that while I didn't know my father, I knew what aspects of my father I had inherited from him and was carrying in my body. That was so fulfilling, brother. And, to bring this story full circle, I finally met my father last year for the very first time. Wow. He's 92. He was 92 years old at the time. I was 72 last year. He's living in Tampa, Florida, and we had a reunion. Nice. So this idea of knowing who you are and connecting to your living family members and genetically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually connecting to your ancestors, brother, is more fulfilling than I could ever describe, because there is something that is a part of our beingness that we will never be taught here in America. If I'm not mistaken, did you say that you knew Dr. Richard King?
No, I don't remember.
Well, Richard King was a psychiatrist.
Okay.
Who did a lot of work in LA with Alfred Ligon, the owner of the Aquarian Spiritual Center. Richard King was based in San Francisco, taught at San Francisco State. He was colleagues with Wade Nobles and Francis Cress Welsing, and they founded the Melanin Conferences in the late 1980s. Mm-hmm. Well, I met Richard King, and Richard King told me, Richard King, as a medically trained psychiatrist, told me that the medical industry talks about genes and how you can create another person or animal or plant by replicating that genetic material. He said, but what they won't tell you, what they will never tell you, is that there is such a thing as genetic memory. And that within your genes are the memories of your ancestors. And if you're able to recognize that and tap into that genetic memory, then you will be able to stream into your consciousness from theirs knowledge and information that will allow you to move through society as a personality who we refer to as a genius. We have numerous examples within the African-American community of geniuses. George Washington Carver is one example that comes to mind. Stevie Wonder is another example that comes to mind. People within our community who excel beyond limitations imposed on us by the social order, excel because of a genius, of a power, of a consciousness that is embedded in their DNA that helps them overcome seemingly insurmountable objects. That's the essence of who we are, and that's our calling card as a people. So to me, to expand our Pan-African consciousness is to embrace what I refer to as ancestral intelligence. Ancestral intelligence is the only AI that matters to a conscious African, because that is our superpower. That is the key to everything that we have done and will accomplish.
Wow, that's incredible. Let me ask you this. I mean, you said, you just, what did you just call it? Ancestral
Ancestral
intelligence.
intelligence, baby.
Yeah, man, that's
Ancestral intelligence.
all right. So as we are, trying to inform our ancestral intelligence, and I want to talk a little bit about cultural tourism, because I know you do the trips you mentioned to Egypt, and you're doing all of these great projects in Egypt and everything. And as you know, we'd run the tourism trips over to, we're getting ready to go to Ghana in December. We've been to South Africa and a few other countries. And when we're talking to people who are interested in travel, their core motivator is trying to elevate their ancestral intelligence, right? They try to see, okay, where did I come from? What are my people like that are over there? They try to see for themselves what Mother Africa is all about. However, there are still others who might be a little bit hesitant, or sometimes I'll just call it fear, because that's what I don't know what they're scared of, but it does seem like they're scared to go all the way over to the continent. What do you say to people who are considering elevating their ancestral intelligence? What do you need to do?
Well, first thing you need to do is read. You need to read about Africa, and you need to read about Africa by reading books written by people of African descent. 90% of what we know about Egypt is wrong. And I say that based on my own personal experiences. 99% of what we know about Africa is also wrong, because the people who have written the books, people who have taught us, people who produced the documentaries had a vested interest in mentally and culturally separating us from the continent that gave birth to humanity, and the continent which provides over 80% of the mineral resources that run technological societies. So Africa is still colonized. Africa is still being raped by Europeans and Asians, because they know that Africa is the key to living on planet Earth. So if you're going to go to Africa, you should read books about Africa written by African people. And I would recommend two books that I would highly recommend. John Jackson's book, Introduction to African Civilization, and Chancellor Williams's classic, Destruction of Black Civilization. So read those books so that you have a more informed understanding of what Africa was, what it has become, and what you as a informed African American could do to recreate an image, a perception of Africa that you can bring into fruition by tapping into and amplifying your ancestral intelligence.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. No, very, very interesting there. It's so funny. Those are great resources too. And where did they get those books? Are they online, or sometimes we have books now. We have to make sure that our books are available to us. A good part of me says we have more access to the information now with technology and whatnot, but I want to make
Mhm.
sure these books are readily available to the people.
Sure, sure. So there are advantages of technology, and there's also disadvantages to technology because of all the disinformation that's out here and is being constantly amplified
Hmm.
by sources here in this country and sources in Europe. That is a fact that everyone knows. So I always encourage people to be careful about what you watch on on YouTube, what you watch on the internet, because there's a lot of disinformation here. And I'm old school. I believe in reading a book. I believe
Yeah,
in holding the
yeah,
book in your hand,
yeah,
highlighting certain passages, writing notes in the margin. And
yeah.
as a entrepreneur, as a cultural entrepreneur, I understand the importance of supporting Black businesses. So yes, you can buy these books on Amazon, but I would encourage you first to go to a Black bookstore and purchase these books from a Black bookstore. And if you can't get it, then as a last resort, buy it from Amazon or any other online book dealer. And there are plenty of African book dealers who are online as well. So here in Washington, we're blessed to have access with several Black bookstores and Black distributors. But know yourself and support those people who can help expedite the process of knowing yourself.
All right, now you got your big event coming up in Washington D.C. I'm excited. I don't know if I can make it, but I'm excited just hearing about it, and would love to, as we've talked before, is to see if we can do something out here on the West Coast. But what is your motivation right now? The blessed hope for you on this particular event as you amplify and illuminate the exhibit down there at the facility in Washington D.C. What do you hope to achieve?
All right, so let me again respond to you from a culturally grounded perspective.
Yeah.
I don't hope to achieve anything because the brain cannot process hope. The
Ah,
brain is an associative organ that responds to specific demands
mm,
or requests, and all hope does is put the brain on a cycle where it can't complete anything. So it's just spinning around. I hope this happens. I hope this happens. No, once you understand how the brain functions, you give the brain a specific instruction, and the brain will do everything within its power to achieve that objective. And so I know that we're going to create a transformative event on the 21st and 22nd of this month. I know that because I've done it before, right?
ah,
I have a track record
yeah,
of doing these things, and that I also know what the outcome is going to be. And I
right.
know that because, I would like to say that over the past 47 years, I have tapped into and cultivated my ancestral intelligence. And I do things that I am motivated to do, that I am compelled to do. And when I understand the source of this motivation and align myself with thoughts that are coming to me from my ancestors, from the spiritual aspect of my being, then
Mm,
I am guaranteed success. So I don't have to hope. I think about what I want. I listen to my thoughts. I plan out the process for manifesting what it is I choose to bring into existence. And I bring it into existence by following a specific order of things. There's a statement I'll share with you that has been my formula for cultivating ancestral intelligence since 1977. That statement is: a mind that is hopeful, again, that word hope. So, I understand that differently now. A mind that is intentional, shall I say, confident and courageous, determined on its set purpose, and keeping itself to that purpose, attracts to itself things and powers favorable to that purpose, right? That is how our ancestors in Kemet in the Nile Valley, in the country that we now call Egypt, cultivated the longest continuously existing civilization known to mankind. That's how they were able to build temples and monuments and pyramids that mankind today, with all of their advanced technology, cannot replicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's about understanding information that has been hidden, intentionally hidden, that has been kept away from us in order to keep us functioning at a dysfunctional level and being content with living as subhuman beings, as opposed to manifesting the true power that has always existed in us. So within that context, my brother, you don't have to beg anybody for anything. All you have to do is to be clear as to what your needs are, to understand how your needs, when achieved, will benefit yourself, your family, and your community. And if you are in alignment on those three levels, then that intentional thought will draw that knowledge and that power to you to fulfill your objective. That's who we are. That's exactly what we are as Homo sapiens sapiens, as thinking people, people who have the capacity for thought, people who know who they are and have studied the best of what their ancestors have done and follow the paths, the formulas to replicate and to amplify that power. And once you do that, it's an entirely different ball game.
Wow, that's very powerful stuff. I love it. I wrote down a couple of those things right there. I
There you
love it.
go.
I love it. Yes.
There you go.
Let me ask you. Okay, so now the folks in America, maybe I asked this earlier, but I'm just really still on this page here. How do I want to say this? How do we keep the fires stoked in our souls to keep seeking and learning about our African consciousness?
Good.
Even in this country, we're getting bombarded. We start participating. We're sending Kamala money. We do it, all this stuff that's going on. How do we keep our African center?
Sure. Well, the key is to find that African center first and make sure you're grounded in it, send down a very serious taproot, as opposed to responding in a knee-jerk reactions to things that make you feel good and give you hope, right? Give you hope for a short period of time and then let you down, right? So it's wonderful that Sister Kamala was able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in a matter of weeks. That's wonderful. But think about this. What would happen if a fraction of that money went to Black institutions, Black schools, Black organizations that are doing meaningful work? We could fund our own liberation in a generation. Think about the hundreds of millions of dollars that have flowed into her coffers, her campaign coffers, and understand that 80% of that money will be spent on campaign ads, radio, television, and God knows what. And so who does that money go to? That money goes to people who don't look like us.
That's right.
So we need to understand how to move beyond things that create momentum and buzz and cultivate a long-term strategy to use our time, our talent, and our treasures to invest in institutions that are worth investing in that will reap benefits for multiple generations. Now, Kamala may be in office 4 years, 8 years, and then she's gone. But if we can use our resources to invest in multiple generations, we're talking about changing the face of our lives for hundreds and hundreds of years. That to me is where our focus needs to be. I'm not saying, don't invest in anybody's campaign who you have confidence in, but also invest in people in your community. Invest in organizations and businesses in your community. Because right now, we see that our schools are under attack. we see that our books are being banned. There's a move afoot right now by certain elements within this country who want to take us back 50 or 60 years and put white male people back in charge of our minds and our bodies. That's real. And if we don't wake up and understand what is at stake and do the things that we've always had the capacity to do, then game over. Game is over. So these are times that demand serious vision, a serious understanding of who we were, who we are, and who we must become. So this concept of Sankofa, which is, you travel to Ghana, so you understand Sankofa. These are principles and concepts and ideas that should be talked about in every fraternity, every sorority, every Masonic lodge, every church, every school should understand these concepts and tap into a stream of African cultural values that validates who we are so that we can build on this and bring our children into this knowing so that they won't be diverted by all of these traps that are out here just waiting to suck the life out of their bodies and put them either on Skid Row or in prison, right? So the issues, the challenges that we're confronted with, that we've always been confronted with. There's never been a time in the history of America where we have not been confronted with these same challenges. The only thing that's new is the date on the calendar. So if we understand the tools that we have always had at our disposal and be intentional about accessing these tools, amplifying these tools, using them within our family and our communities, to the extent to which we are serious about doing this work is the extent to which we will reap the benefits. And that's how the process works.
That's how the process works. Wow. Tony Browder, thank you so much, man, for coming on to Coffee Conversations with Greg J. I know you're over there making things happen in Washington, D.C. Actually, D.C., I've been to D.C. only once in my whole life, and that's on my bucket list to come and hang out. I want to go to the African American History Museum, and I want to come visit you. And there's a few other people around there in D.C. area that I would love to come and kick it with, And man, I really am expecting great success from your event coming up. And I'm very interested in finding out, and I'm sure people who may come across this podcast are very interested in when's your next educational tour to Egypt to help us elevate our ancestral intelligence?
Well, I'm doing something a little different next year.
Okay.
Instead of traveling to Egypt next summer, I'm going to do a special tour. I've got a new book that will be out next Friday. It's a revision of my book on the excavation. It's called Finding Karakomen, and I've expanded the book to cover all 15 years of our excavations in Egypt. That book will be out next Friday. We'll do book signings with Charles Finch, who will be with us next weekend. And then I'm working on a third volume of Browder File essays, a book entitled Why Kemet Matters. And so I'm planning to do next summer, next July, a Why Kemet Matters tour. And what we're going to do is go to 2 European cities, London and Paris. Why Europe? Well, we're going to visit the British Museum in London and the Louvre in Paris. Why? Because if you want to understand African history, you have to go to European museums. Most of our knowledge, historical knowledge, has been stolen and put into European cultural repositories. So we're going to do a tour of London, visit the British Museum. I'll do a curated tour of the Egyptian artifacts in the museum. We are going to arrange a tour of Black London. And then we're going to set up a special engagement in the community where I'll do a presentation along with a scholar, a local scholar from Britain, from London. And then we're going to go to Paris and do the same thing in Paris. So we'll have the opportunity to travel to Europe, to see Africa in Europe, to see Egypt in Europe, and so that we can expand the consciousness of those within our group. So I would encourage your listeners to this podcast, the viewers of this video, to go to ikg-info.com, ikg-info.com to get information about our activities. We will be live streaming the event that we're having next Friday, the 20th of September, with Dr. Charles Finch. That event will be live streamed. Details are on our website under the events heading. And then the Saturday event will be recorded. We'll film that, and then we'll have that film available at some point in the future for people to see. So we have numerous ways that people can stay in tune with what we're doing and support our efforts and free their minds in the process.
Free your mind. That's what's up right there. Any parting shots before we get out of here?
Well, this idea you mentioned Pan-African consciousness. I just this Monday received an invitation to be part of a delegation that will be traveling to Lomé, Togo, at the end of October in order to participate in the next Pan-African Congress conference, which will be held in Lomé, the capital of Togo. So I will be happy to be able to participate in a tradition that was initiated in London in the early 20th century by some of the most brilliant minds within America and the Caribbean, who met in London at several Pan-African conferences that brought together Africans from the diaspora to plot a path forward to liberate themselves and liberate Africa. So that is an activity that we're still engaged in, and hopefully I can share some information with you when I get back. But I want your listeners to understand how critically important it is that we see ourselves through African eyes. Black people are not dark-skinned white people. We have our own way of moving through the world, our own way of thinking and relating to the Creator. And these things have validated who we are as a people. The more we know ourselves, the more we can grow into our true beingness. And it's important as a grandfather. I'm a new grandfather myself. My grandson will be 8 months old this coming Saturday. And I understand how important it is to cultivate the consciousness of the generations that we bring into the world. I take parenting seriously. And we have to give our children books written by people who look like them. They have to see themselves in the books. And we're responsible for their education. The first education takes place in the household. And I've always been a strong advocate of having books in your home. Every African person should have a library. And our children should spend more time reading than they do watching television. They should spend more time discussing what they've read than playing video games. So conscientious adults have a responsibility to model for those that we love how to live their lives so that we can ensure that the generations who come behind us will be grateful for the sacrifices that we made to prepare them to live and to prosper in a world which their ancestors helped to develop.
All right, y'all. Tony Browder with us, Pan-African scholar, just one of the brightest minds in this space that we have in this present day and time. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on to Coffee Conversations with Greg J and spreading knowledge. You got an open door here. Let's keep it going. Let's keep the dialogues going and also see how we can collaborate together, get you out here and do some presentations and films and talks, so the folks out here on the West Coast can enhance and amplify their ancestral intelligence.
Well, brother, I've got 2 books that will be out within the next 6 months. And I'll be doing some speaking tours, book signings, and I'm sure I'll be back out on the West Coast in the very near future. So I'll look you up, I'll hook you up, and we'll make something happen for sure.
Let's get it. Let's get it. Thank you so much. So much. This has been Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Tony Browder's been with us here We're just kind of chopping it up about our consciousness and how important it is to be a African-centered person here in America. You can get us on our Facebook pages, and also we repurpose the audio. We put it out there as a podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. I mean, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, just wherever. Just type in there Coffee Conversations with Greg J. It'll pop up. The episodes will be right there. It's also on our website, Beach City Radio, beachcityradio.com. Also, now we're going to start embedding the stuff over on Kalimba Song Coffee Company, kalimbasongcoffeecompany.com. Love one another, y'all. Peace and blessings.